G'day, my name's Chris Anderson and welcome back to the Endo & Co podcast. It's been a little while since I've recorded an episode because I just wanted to take a little bit of time to sit back and think about exactly why it is that I'm actually doing these podcast episodes. So for the last, 7 years, I've been running Beers with Mates, which has meant that on the first Friday of each month, people have come along to have a beer and meet some new people on the first Friday of the month at Soapbox Beer. And at about the same time, I decided I wanted to start running a podcast as well. And for a long time, that really just gave me an opportunity to start looking to develop my skills in asking good questions and helping people tell their story better. It got to a point where I'd done this quite a bit and I was happy with the skill set that I had. And then I started to focus more on building out the coaching skill set that I have. And so in the time that I've sort of dropped the podcast for a little while, back in sort of October 2023 through to now, I've been focusing on building that coaching skill set. And now that I've built that skill set, I'm able to bring the podcast back online to start developing that more as well. And I'm thinking there might be a possibility that I start running this podcast with other hosts as well, just to add a slightly different flavour to it. But before I do that, I probably, while I was working at Ray White Bulimba, I recorded, sorry if I'm huffing and puffing, I'm just out for a walk this morning. But I was working at Ray White Bulimba and I decided I'd tell a bit of a story about what it is that's brought me to here and who I am as your host. So I thought I'd go through the process of just telling that story again. Now, to start right from the start on this, I finished school 2003. I went to Villanova College. In the years since then, I've been the president of the Old Boys Association at Villa. It was a great school, had some great mates from there, some of which I'm still really good friends with, some of which I'm still not really that close with anymore. But it was a great grounding for me to, one, play a lot of sports, two, get a good education, but three, just learn to fit in the world. And then I decided to go to uni. I studied the two subjects that I knew people in my family had studied before. That was finance and economics. And I ended up working in a stockbroking firm in 2008. Now, 2008 stockbroking was very sexy, of course. The market was doing particularly well. Little did I know that in September 2008, that would be the first time that I'd lose a job. So I got made redundant from Wilson Stockbroking September 2008. Was lucky enough for a lady there to introduce me to the people at Morgan's Stockbroking. So I ended up at Morgan's within a couple of months. Moved from working in domestic settlements at Wilson's to working in international settlements at Morgan's. Eventually decided I wanted to move into another role at Morgan's. Was able to go through a mentoring program at the company where they gave me an opportunity to meet some other people within the firm. And based on that, I looked to move into the economics team. That didn't quite work out. But the guy who had become the CFO at Morgan's had actually just moved from the economics team at KPMG. And he sort of went, mate, if you want to do that, maybe I can introduce you to the KPMG team. So that happened. I ended up getting a job at KPMG. Moved across there for a couple of years, learned a whole lot of things. And that's where I really learned how to work hard. It's also where I learned to develop my analytical abilities above and beyond what I'd already done when I was at uni. I met a girl while I was at KPMG and it got to the point where I was like, all right, I reckon I've got a skill set now that I could take overseas. So I followed her over to Toronto. When I got there, I sort of thought to myself, all right, I could look to keep working in consulting, but in a market like this, which is bigger than Brisbane, they're saying to me, you need an MBA to work in consulting. They're saying to me, you need an MBA or a CFA to work in consulting. And I'm like, dude, I've already done this work. Why would I need to do extra study to do similar work to what I've already done, to have to work potentially longer hours, to have to potentially get paid less money? I was like, this doesn't make sense anymore. So while I was at KPMG, one of the skills that I looked to develop, which was an avenue that didn't quite open up to me, was my ability to work with people. My partner at KPMG at the time was like, dude, what do you mean work with people? Women work with people. You work with financial analysis. I don't know why you'd want to do that. So I was like, all right, well, that's fair, that's a reasonable point. But it was something that I did want to focus on. So that was my goal. I started working with people and I did it in commission-only sales. So I worked at Investors Group for a year, met the sales targets, made less money than the year before when I was at KPMG, but I learned a lot, and I learned to slowly work on developing more of a sales mindset rather than a consultant employee mindset. Being an employee, you want to just get things done as well as possible. You're not that worried about how long it takes, and you're not that worried about bringing in consistent clients. Whereas when you work in sales, your goal is not necessarily to have perfect conversations. It's just to get results, right? So that was something that I needed to learn. And after I'd worked at Investors Group for a little while, a friend of mine, Alyssa, sort of said, "Oh, maybe this isn't quite the career for you. Maybe have a chat with my friend Lauren, who was working in a business called Scholarhood at the time, and see if you want to come into real estate." So while I was finishing up at Investors Group, I got my real estate license and I became the cold caller at the company called Scholarhood. Now, Scholarhood was a business where we helped people buy homes in good school districts. So that was something that was interesting to me. I was speaking to people who valued education. And basically what my job was to speak to 100 people a day and book appointments with the sales team to potentially have them sell the house. So that was what I did. I didn't realise that was quite a lot of activity, which is the norm, but it was a lot more activity than what I'd been doing while I was at Investors Group. And the reason that I was able to do all of that activity is because someone else was building the call list for me, and also because I was on an auto dialer the whole time. So that was a great opportunity. Eventually I became a salesperson in that team, focusing mainly on working with buyers. And so we help people buy homes in good school districts. We also help people rent homes in good school districts. And it was a good opportunity. While I was there, they actually bought a brand called Zoocasa. And if you can imagine in Australia that someone like Telstra is running a business that's kind of like realestate.com, and they're pouring $1 million a month into marketing, but not making the lead generation and sales business work. That was what was happening with Zoocasa. Now, Scholarhood was run by people who also ran a business called RateHub, which was a lead generation website. So they knew how to turn a lead generation website into business, which was a way that they knew when they bought this brand, they could actually monetize it. So that's what they did. It didn't quite work out for me. I had one of the first disagreements I'd ever had at work, and that was a disagreement I had with the main salesperson at Zoocasa, who in my mind was just a bitch. But after having learned more about personality types, she was more of that driving style salesperson like a Donald Trump, where the only thing that really mattered was her results, and she was willing to steamroll everyone else just for the sake of getting her results. So she didn't work out in the business, which was no surprise to me. But my boss at the time was somewhat similar to her. And at the end of the day, when your top salesperson who's making most of the money is upsetting the people in the business, you can either decide to focus on culture or you can decide to focus on results. And results was what helped them grow their business. It's just that that particular salesperson, Chantel, didn't stay in the business for longer than 2 years after that. Little bit of word of warning for Chantel. In her first year, second year in real estate, let's say she made like 80 grand first year. Second year, she did 740 grand gross commissions. She did 56 buyer deals that year. She worked pretty much 7 days a week. At the end of the year, she was 8 months pregnant. Next year, she had cancer. So she got results. She could run through walls to get deals done. But it wasn't helpful overall for her health. And hopefully she's doing well since then. But for me, it was great to meet a person who was so committed to getting the results, because that was something that I wasn't really aware of previously. So just walking through the back hills of St. Lucia. So unfortunately walking up the hill, hence the labouring struggle. Anyway, I ended up leaving that business and decided I was going to do my own thing in the area where I was living. So I ended up buying a place on the Danforth in Toronto with my ex, and I decided that I'd focus in that area. It was great. I developed a marketing system to help me find buyer clients. The system was very good. I put a lot of effort into developing it, but it didn't really get me the sales results I needed. So then I went through a period of probably the first depression I'd ever been through in my life. Coincided with us having just bought a place. Also coincided with me not really having many clients in a commission-only role where I'm making very little money. So it was that soul-searching lesson in not quite the middle part of my life at the time, where I was like, what is this that's going on? Why is it that I'm unhappy? And what is it that I should be focusing on moving forward? I remember I got an opportunity to work with the Provencher brothers at about this time, and they held me accountable to do the work, to get listings, to make more money. And I did a lot of role play training with them at the time, which was very helpful. And I realised at the time, this is when I'd already wanted to have a podcast. I'd already met a guy who ran a meetup group, and that I also realised that I'd love to be a coach. So in the time since then, I've run a podcast, run a meetup group, and been a coach. So this is the area in which my life was heading back then, which was like end of 2016. It's just that I hadn't really had the results just yet to have the courage to make that work. Now, since I got back to Australia, I've had multiple different jobs. I went back into stockbroking only to realise that that wasn't the role for me. I ended up selling coaching, which was also a really good opportunity, but again, had a salesperson that we didn't really get along. I moved into sales recruitment, loved that, loved getting an opportunity to work with salespeople, hear their story, find roles for them, was able to place people in some good roles, but again, had a disagreement with the salesperson boss, which ended up in that role finishing. Fortunately, prior to that happening, I'd secured a role in real estate, at Pure Real Estate, with Russell, and that went really well. That was like the first time in a long time where I felt secure in a job. And so because I was feeling secure in a job, I started being more open about my mental health struggles. I won't go into that in much detail here, only to say if you want to learn more, you can reach out to me and I can send you some more details. So after I got into real estate, I again was like, well, what am I going to do here? So he got to the point where he's like, okay, you've had a couple of good years, now I want you to go to commission only. And I was like, fuck, I'm not ready for commission only just yet. And I was still scared of what commission only felt like when I was in Toronto. So I ended up getting another role when I was at Ray White Bulimba, which allowed me to have a salary again based on a debit credit system, which meant that I basically had money coming in. It wasn't just purely commission only. Anyway, I had that job at Ray White Bulimba. It was a good opportunity both for me at Pure Real Estate and Ray White Bulimba to do a whole lot of data analysis, to look at what's been happening, especially in the lead up to the years after 2020, when the market started to kick off in Brisbane. So I did some analysis for every suburb in Brisbane in the lead up to about 2022. I then looked back on the Toronto data for like a 10-year period from 2013 to 2023. I then moved to Ray White Bulimba, looked at all the capital cities, looked at southeast Queensland, like Sunshine Coast, Gold Coast, Toowoomba versus Brisbane, and was able to get a bit of a better feel for what's been happening in the market across all the capital cities in Australia over the last decade or so. But I also realised, I was like, okay, I don't really think that being a real estate agent is the thing. And I'd already had that realisation when I was in Canada in 2016. But it was just that was the option at the time. So then I started looking for more jobs, and I got a really cruisy job working at Compare the Market. So it was just like salary plus commissions, show up to work each day, 9 to 5, wear a t-shirt and shorts, and sell insurance on the phone. So I sold home insurance, sold car insurance, worked with a whole lot of young people, and was basically just able to just fully relax, know that I was earning pretty reasonable money. I got married at the end of 2024, and then in the meantime was able to secure another job where I am now at HRO Property, where I again work in property, but it's more from a development management perspective, and just recently we've been able to open up the acquisitions role as well. So basically we work with developers who maybe they have land. So let's say they own, 10 hectares and they want to turn it into X number of lots, but they don't really have the skills to be able to do the development. We would help them with the development management. We basically manage all the consultants. We're held accountable to get the result. We get the result for them. We get paid regularly. And then, as I said, acquisitions has just opened up for me as well. So that's basically helping people find sites for them to do developments as well. So yeah, it's been a bit of a journey, and it's really nice to now be in a role where I get paid a salary. I don't really have to worry about income, and I'm still getting to learn and grow every day when I go to work, working with a good team, and being happy with who I am in the role where I get to show up every day at work. So now that I've got that grounded feeling of having a good job, I want to get back into exploring a little bit more of the podcast and coaching side as well. So yeah, the first podcast we're going to do is going to be with a guy that I met at Compare the Market, Christian Cook. He's a bit of a character, so I look forward to you hearing a bit more about his story. He's a sales guy. He was working in a bottle shop prior to working at Compare the Market, but he's also got a background in a bit of mixed martial arts as well. So he's a good fella. I look forward to you hearing that story. Maybe we'll even do some podcasts together in the future, but we'll see how that plays out. So thanks for taking the time to listen with me. I'll continue my walk to work, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Bye.